They say communication is the bridge that connects us, that reaching out is simple, natural, a basic human instinct, that picking up the phone and calling someone should feel as effortless as breathing. But what if, for some people, that phone feels less like a bridge and more like a trap? What if the moment they need to make a call, even a simple one, their chest tightens, their throat closes, and their mind fills with 1,000 reasons to delay, avoid, cancel? We are told that avoiding phone calls is irrational, that it's a minor inconvenience, not a real struggle, that people who can't just make the call are overthinking, being dramatic, or simply lacking basic social skills. But what if the refusal isn't about the call itself? What if it's about everything the call represents? The unpredictability, the pressure to respond in real time, the vulnerability of your voice being heard without the buffer of text, without time to edit, without the safety of distance. This is not a video about being shy. It's not about introversion or social anxiety, though those threads are woven into this fabric. This is about something quieter, something that lives in the space between your finger hovering over the call button and the wave of dread that makes you put the phone down. It's about the people who would rather send 10 text messages than make one phone call. The ones who rehearse what they'll say, write scripts, and still feel their heart racing when the line starts ringing. The ones who avoid making appointments, calling customer service, or reaching out to friends not because they don't care, but because the act of calling feels like stepping into an arena without armor. And beneath that avoidance, beneath the shame, the guilt, the fear of being judged as incompetent, is a story no one asks about. Let's begin. You know the moment. You need to make a phone call, a doctor's appointment, a complaint about a bill, a simple question that could be answered in 30 seconds, and inside, something freezes, not just nerves, not just hesitation, it's a full-body resistance, a visceral no. Your mind starts bargaining. Maybe I can do this online. Maybe I can text instead. Maybe if I wait, the problem will resolve itself. And even as you know you're being irrational, that the call will take 2 minutes, that it's not a big deal, you still can't bring yourself to dial. This is the quiet torment of people who hate making phone calls. They are not lazy. They are not incompetent. They are not avoiding responsibility. They are navigating an internal landscape where phone calls feel like walking into a room blindfolded, where every second of silence feels like failure, where the demand to think, speak, and respond in real time feels like being asked to perform without rehearsal. You are not dramatic for dreading phone calls. You are not weak for finding them overwhelming. You are not broken because something that seems effortless to others feels impossible to you, but the world doesn't see it that way. The world sees your avoidance and calls it laziness, your hesitation and calls it immaturity, your anxiety and calls it an overreaction. And so you begin to wonder, why can't I just do this like everyone else? What is wrong with me? Why does something so simple feel so hard? We live in a world that has normalized constant availability. The person who answers calls immediately, who handles things efficiently over the phone, who can speak clearly and confidently without preparation. They are seen as competent, professional, put together. But the person who avoids calls, who lets voicemails pile up, who would rather endure an inconvenience than pick up the phone, they are misunderstood. Society tells us that communication should be easy, that if you struggle with something as basic as making a phone call, you must be socially deficient, emotionally immature, or hiding from adult responsibilities. But what if that's not true? What if people who hate making phone calls aren't incompetent? They're hyper-aware. What if they don't struggle because they lack skills, but because they feel too much? This is not about disliking conversation. It's about the specific terror of unscripted, real-time interaction where there's no escape, no pause button, no chance to gather your thoughts before responding. You don't hate phone calls because they're meaningless. You hate them because they demand a level of immediacy and vulnerability that feels unbearable. To speak without knowing what the other person will say, to navigate silence without seeing their face, to manage your tone, your words, your anxiety all at once with no time to prepare. And when you do force yourself to make the call, you spend the rest of the day replaying it, analyzing every word, wondering if you sounded stupid, awkward, incompetent. This is not paranoia. This is hypervigilance, and it's exhausting. Let's go back to the beginning. Because this pattern didn't start with your first adult phone call. It started long before you could name it. Maybe you grew up in a home where communication felt dangerous, where the wrong tone, the wrong words, the wrong timing could trigger anger, punishment, or withdrawal. So you learned early, words have consequences. Speaking without preparation is a risk, and phone calls where you can't see the other person's face, can't read their mood, can't predict their response became a minefield. Or maybe you grew up in a home where you were interrupted constantly, where your words were dismissed, corrected, or talked over before you could finish. So you learned, my voice doesn't matter. What I say will be misunderstood or ignored. And phone calls where you have to hold space with your voice alone became a reminder of that powerlessness. Or maybe you were the child who was put on the phone with relatives you barely knew, forced to perform politeness, to answer questions you didn't want to answer, to speak when you had nothing to say. So you learned, phone calls are performances, and I'm always being judged. These early experiences didn't make you broken. They made you vigilant. They taught you that communication is not safe, that speaking without control is dangerous, that your voice without the protection of text or time to edit might betray you. And so you developed a survival strategy. If I avoid the call, I avoid the risk. If I don't speak, I can't say the wrong thing. If I stay silent, I stay safe. But here's the cost. You also stay stuck. From a psychological perspective, the fear of making phone calls is often rooted in what's called performance anxiety combined with a need for control. People who hate phone calls are not socially inept. They are cognitively and emotionally burdened by the unpredictability of live conversation. Phone calls require real-time processing. You can't pause to think. You can't edit before you send. You can't reread the conversation to check for mistakes. Neuroscience shows us that individuals with heightened anxiety have overactive amygdalae, the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats. And for someone whose nervous system is wired to scan for danger, a phone call is full of potential threats. What if I stumble over my words? What if there's an awkward silence? What if they think I'm stupid? What if I forget what I wanted to say? What if I can't understand them and have to ask them to repeat themselves? These are not irrational fears. They are the brain's attempt to protect you from perceived social danger. But the problem is, the brain can't distinguish between real danger and social discomfort, so it treats a phone call the same way it would treat a physical threat, with fight, flight, or freeze. And most of the time, you freeze. There's also the issue of auditory processing and the lack of visual cues. In face-to-face conversation, you read body language, facial expressions, gestures. You have context, but on a phone call, all of that is gone. You're left with just a voice. And voices without visual grounding can feel disorienting, ambiguous, even threatening. You can't tell if someone is annoyed by their tone alone. You can't gauge if a silence is comfortable or awkward. You can't see if they're distracted or genuinely listening. And for people who rely heavily on visual cues to navigate social interaction, this creates a cognitive overload. Every silence feels like judgment. Every shift in tone feels like disapproval. Every second where you're searching for words feels like failure. And so the call, which should take 2 minutes, becomes a minefield of micro-anxieties that leave you exhausted before you've even dialed. But here's where it gets complicated, because even though you hate making phone calls, you also feel shame about it. You know it's not logical. You know other people don't struggle like this. You know you should just do it. And so you carry this quiet belief: I'm defective, I'm incompetent, I'm failing at something basic. This creates a painful paradox. You avoid phone calls because they cause anxiety, but the avoidance creates more anxiety about being judged, about being seen as irresponsible, about letting people down. So you're caught in a loop. The more you avoid, the more shame you feel. The more shame you feel, the harder it becomes to break the pattern, and eventually, the avoidance hardens into identity. You start to see yourself as someone who can't handle phone calls, someone who's socially broken, someone who will always struggle with something others find easy, and that belief becomes a cage.
I'm at the supermarket.
Let's talk about what this costs you, because the price of avoiding phone calls is not just missed appointments or delayed tasks. It's the opportunities you don't take because they require a phone call to access. It's the relationships that fade because you can't bring yourself to call, even when you want to. It's the quiet erosion of your sense of competence, your confidence, your belief that you can handle the basic demands of life. You watch other people pick up the phone without hesitation, and you wonder, what do they have that I don't? But the answer isn't that they're braver or more capable. It's that their nervous systems aren't wired to perceive phone calls as threats. They don't carry the same history, the same hypervigilance, the same belief that their voice, unfiltered and live, might expose something shameful. And so what feels effortless to them feels like scaling a mountain to you. There's also the loneliness of it, because no one talks about this. No one admits how much they dread making phone calls. It's seen as trivial, something you should just get over, and so you suffer in silence, believing you're the only one who feels this way. But you're not. There are millions of people who would rather endure inconvenience, financial loss, or missed opportunities than make a phone call, who have voicemails they've never listened to, calls they've avoided for months, scripts written and rewritten for conversations they never have. This is not weakness, this is not immaturity, this is a nervous system response, a learned pattern, a form of self-protection that once made sense, but now holds you hostage. But here's the turning point. And it doesn't come as courage, it comes as exhaustion. One day, you realize the cost of avoiding this call is greater than the cost of making it. Not because you've conquered your fear, but because you're too tired to keep running. And so you dial. Your hands shake. Your heart races. You stumble over your words. But you do it. And when it's over, when the call that felt like a mountain turns out to be 2 minutes long, you feel something unexpected. Not relief, not pride. Grief. Grief for all the times you didn't call, for all the opportunities you missed, for all the energy you spent avoiding something that, in the end, was survivable, and in that grief a whisper. What if I've been carrying a fear that's bigger than the thing itself? Let's be clear, you are allowed to hate making phone calls. You are allowed to find them overwhelming, anxiety-inducing, exhausting. You are allowed to prefer text, email, any form of communication that gives you time to think. This is not immaturity. This is self-awareness. Because you know what costs you energy. You know what feels safe and what doesn't. And there is nothing wrong with honoring that. But there's a difference between honoring your needs and letting fear make your decisions. Between protecting your energy and imprisoning yourself in avoidance, and only you can know which one you're doing. Healing, in this context, is not about forcing yourself to love phone calls. It's not about becoming someone who picks up the phone without a second thought. Healing is about separating the fear from the action. It's about recognizing that you can feel afraid and still make the call. That your anxiety is valid, but it doesn't have to control you. That the discomfort of the call is temporary, but the cost of avoidance compounds. This doesn't mean you have to make every call. It doesn't mean you can't use text when it's an option. It means you stop letting the fear decide for you. Integration looks like this. You acknowledge the fear. You don't shame yourself for it. You prepare in ways that help you feel safer writing down what you need to say, calling during times when you feel calmer, giving yourself permission to stumble. You make the call even when your hands shake. And afterwards you practice self-compassion instead of self-criticism. You stop replaying the conversation looking for mistakes. You stop punishing yourself for pauses, for awkward moments, for not being perfect. You remind yourself, I did the thing I was afraid of, and I survived. Here's what no one tells you. Most people on the other end of the phone are not judging you the way you think they are. They're not analyzing your pauses. They're not noting your tone. They're not thinking about you at all once the call ends. Because they're busy thinking about their own concerns, their own to-do lists, their own lives. The scrutiny you fear is almost entirely in your own mind. And recognizing that doesn't make the fear go away, but it does make it smaller. There's also this. Every time you make a call you've been avoiding, you're rewriting the story your nervous system has been telling you. You're teaching your brain, this is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. I can feel afraid and still function. I am more capable than my fear tells me I am. And over time, those lessons accumulate. The calls don't stop being uncomfortable, but they stop feeling impossible. And that shift from impossible to uncomfortable changes everything. So no, you don't have to love making phone calls. You don't have to stop feeling anxious about them. You don't have to be someone you're not. But you also don't have to let the fear run your life. You don't have to miss opportunities because of something that takes 2 minutes. You don't have to carry shame for struggling with something others find easy, because your struggle is not a character flaw, it's a nervous system pattern. And patterns can change. Not overnight, not easily, but slowly, gently, with self-compassion instead of self-judgment. And maybe the real question is not, why do I hate making phone calls? Maybe the real question is, what would my life look like if this fear had less power over me? And the answer to that question might surprise you, not because your life would transform dramatically, but because you'd stop organizing your entire existence around avoiding a 2-minute conversation. You'd stop declining opportunities that require a phone call. You'd stop feeling trapped by your own avoidance. You'd stop believing you're broken for struggling with something so basic. And in that space, you'd find something you didn't expect: freedom, not from the discomfort, but from the prison of avoidance. Here's the truth: you are not broken for hating phone calls. You are not incompetent. You are not immature. You are not failing at being an adult. You are someone whose nervous system learned, long ago, that unscripted communication is dangerous. And that learning has kept you safe in some ways, but it's also kept you small. And now, you get to decide, do I want to keep living inside this fear? Or do I want to see what's on the other side of it? You don't have to answer that question today. You don't have to change overnight. But you do get to know this: you are capable of more than your fear tells you. And the phone call you've been avoiding, it's not as big as the mountain you've built around it. It's just a phone call, and you can make it, even if your hands shake, even if you stumble, even if it's not perfect. You can do it. And when you do, you'll remember something you've forgotten. You are not your fear. You are the person who faces it. If this video made you feel seen, if something in these words touched the part of you that rehearses conversations in your head, the part that avoids voicemails like they're landmines, the part that feels a wave of dread every time you need to make a call, then know this: you are not alone. You have never been alone. There is a quiet, invisible community of people who understand exactly what it's like to feel trapped by something so seemingly small, who know the shame of avoiding a phone call for weeks, who know the exhaustion of living inside this particular kind of fear. And this space, this channel, is for you. If you'd like to stay connected to this space, you're welcome here. This is a place where we explore the hidden corners of the human heart, the parts that feel too much, the parts that carry fears others don't understand, the parts that struggle with things the world calls simple. We don't offer quick fixes or tough love. We don't tell you to just get over it or just do it. We offer something rarer: understanding. Understanding that your fear is real, that your struggle is valid, that you are not broken for finding phone calls unbearable. If that resonates with you, consider subscribing, not because you have to, but because this might be the space where you finally stop feeling like you're the only one, where your anxiety is not minimized, where your avoidance is not mocked, where your struggle is met with compassion, not judgment. And if you'd like, you can share your own experience below, not because you have to, but because your words might be the permission someone else needs to stop feeling ashamed. Someone out there is reading these comments, wondering if they're the only person who rehearses phone calls 10 times before dialing. Your truth could be the mirror that finally reflects their reality back to them. But whether you comment, subscribe, or simply sit with what you felt today, that's enough. You are enough. You don't need to be braver, more confident, more capable of handling phone calls without anxiety. You just need to know this: your fear does not define you. Your avoidance does not make you broken. Your struggle does not make you less worthy. And the phone call you've been avoiding? It's not as powerful as the story you've been telling yourself about it. You can make the call. Even if it's hard, even if you're scared, you can do it. And when you do, you'll prove to yourself what you've always been too afraid to believe. You are stronger than your fear. Take care of yourself. You deserve gentleness, especially when facing the things that scare you most.